This week on IFBB AMA podcast.
John, you were 212 for years, right? And you pretty much didn't allow yourself to grow because you had certain limitations. And this is one thing that kills me, right?
You know, holding 212 for so long, there's lots of limitations to where you can now make further progress. And, we got to talk about PEDs because that's a thing, but, it doesn't take much. People are like, John barely uses anything. It's like, yeah, man, I'm like maintaining muscle. It doesn't take a lot to do that anymore.
On this episode of AMA Podcast with Chris and Milos, we had John Jewett back on. He changed his whole entire plan this year for competing due to his miraculous progress. He's up 20 pounds from his previous weight getting ready for his show last year and in better condition. He's going to knock out 3 shows. We talked about a little bit what led to this crazy progress after all the training years. Talked about some training, some nutrition, some PED stuff. I suggest you guys check it out. John is a wealth of knowledge, and obviously he's walking proof with everything he teaches. To be quite honest, this most recent jump you moved to open, and then your crazy change in the last 3 months has kind of brought a lot of attention, and people keep messaging me, bro, you see John Jewett's progress? It's like 20 pounds. And I mean, listen, in a nutshell, let's be honest, when somebody has a lot of training years underneath their belt, the ability to somebody to gain 5-10 pounds of stage weight in a year is very difficult, if not impossible, right? Because in that way, it's chipping away, getting better, a couple pounds heavier. But to make the jump you made and pull out this crazy, 20 pounds heavier and leaner and more weeks out to your first show than last year is just unbelievable. I mean, I don't even know how to say it. I mean, look at this. Milos, actually, maybe you've seen this amount, but 12 weeks out last year, 223, 16 weeks out, 252. Bigger, better, leaner. John, what do you say to yourself?
You look back, you're like, you pat yourself on the back, right? You're like, your methods are validated. You're not doing stupid stuff too much. So it's just a constant learning process, right? Like reflecting back on mistakes made and trying to go into this next off season, correcting those mistakes and seeing what other areas you have to pull out. I don't see myself as being some genetic anomaly. So I have to see like, man, how can I do this as perfect as possible? And there's a few things that we could probably dive into around that. But it's been a substantial off season.
Yeah, I want to dive into this because this is educational for all of us. But this puts one thing in perspective. John, you were 212 for years, right? And you pretty much didn't allow yourself to grow because you had certain limitations. And this is one thing that kills me, right? For classic and for 212s, and you know what I mean? Look what's happening right now. I mean, last year you were debating, should you stay in 212? I was trying to encourage you. You still have a chance to win that. But then you went to the Legion and it did so well. And it's okay, you're just never coming back. And it's the right decision. But this growth is mind boggling. At how many years experience you already had? You finally like blowing up like crazy. Like how many years you were sticking with 212?
Since I turned pro in 2016, and so it's now like I guess eight years. That would be just holding around that body weight. I had one off season, Milos, where I got up and I was planning to do open, but I ended up getting pretty sick, getting like a travel issue, and then I was like, oh well, I'll just keep doing 212. And to give some context to this too, I did the Olympia in 2020, and then I went straight into competing the entire 2021 season, and my body weight kept coming down, down, down. So my off season 2022 was basically getting back what I felt like was an all-time best in size for 212, which led into that 2023 season where, man, I barely could make 212 anymore. So I hit like a new size level in 2023, but it still wasn't building upon top of what I've done in the past. And throughout all this too, holding 212 for so long, yeah, there's lots of limitations to where you can now make further progress,
Yeah,
and
so
people would criticize me about we got to talk about PEDs because that's a thing, but it doesn't take much. People are like, John barely uses anything. It's like, yeah, man, I'm like maintaining muscle. It doesn't take a lot to do that anymore.
you had the blueprint of what everybody wants: slow and steady, putting the muscle on the right places, no stomach distension, no waist increases, full of legs, full of chest, full of shoulders, everything. Back down biceps pose that you just show Chris is mind boggling. You were already so big at the Legion. I mean, you were there, next to the guys that's supposed to outmass you, and they didn't. So you are the scale guy. What do you estimate right now that you could make it on the stage?
I think I would be low 230s.
Look at those.
I have a comparison of condition, and I was 229, very similar condition. I ended up coming down around the 217 mark. So in other words, like I know that I had to pull off about 13 pounds to be conditioned. However, that look was I was already in prep. So I was already a little glycogen depleted and my food was lower. So I needed to account for GI weight, right? I'm all calculations. So I figure probably it needs to be about 15 to 18 pounds to pull off, which would likely land me around probably 230 in the morning. So maybe going on stage in that low 230 area.
Now, for context, for people listening, both know, what did you weigh the last open show and got second?
That the mornings I was around 221 ish, and I went on stage around 223, 224.
Okay.
So maybe another 8 pounds of stage weight or so up. I tried to underestimate that, so I
Yeah.
make sure I'm just peeled out to the bone, right?
And I do, looking at these pictures, this picture looks like it would be like a 3-year comparison. You know what I mean? Couple-year comparison. But you mentioned something previously. You said you had to iron out some mistakes and kind of overcome them to continue the rate of progress you had, and obviously accelerate rate of progress. For yourself, what type of mistakes, or we call troubleshooting, did you find yourself that you overcame that led to this progress? Because whether it's somebody having sleep issues, whether it's somebody constantly getting sick from travel, whether it's injuries, whether it's appetite, what did you find with yourself that you had to like navigate so you could have a more smooth off season?
Well, Milos actually said something that really stands out, and he's like, when you're massing and adding size, there's no reason you need to get fat.
Right.
And I know he holds true to that, and I thoroughly believe that as well. In my last off season, before I dieted for that 212 season, I was up to like 262, and man, I was just way too fat, and it looked lean, but to what you need to pull off, I went from 260 down all the way pulling down to 212 eventually, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, all right, for one, I'm not getting fat. Like that's the rate of weight gain needs to be in check. But also I was like, I need to get to a state post show, right? Where I'm at my leanest point to start the off season without any of the negatives with prep. So no sleep derangement. You're not food focused, right? You have good daily energy. Like I want my baseline to be there. I'm recovered from prep, but I'm at my leanest. And so that was like the priority around it. So not eating way off plan, big cheat meals, like your post show period, it's so detrimental to setting the standard of what your off season is going to be, and then in turn what your next prep is going to be. So I was just very controlled with like I would eat within my calorie allotment for the week and never went out on like big like cheat meals where I would gain a bunch of weight just off one meal, right? So that kind of like is where I set after about 7 weeks from Legion. So we're like, all right, I can start my off season here, and that's where you see I was at that 232 mark where I started like my true off season. So I had good condition to begin with, and that was a big piece. Don't get fat. I think another points around why guys get fat is that they lose a lot of the consistency they had throughout contest prep with controlling their energy balance. So guys aren't like tracking their steps as accurately, or like little foods are sneaking in here or there, and then you just end up at a faster rate of weight gain than what you intended. So
Maybe
everything has been like just my steps, my cardio, and my nutrition has been just regulated to where I can have predictive weight increase throughout this journey.
So you're basically essentially, you can say you're running a contest prep in reverse.
Yeah,